Because I told you I couldn't run, and I was running 2 weeks later, and I was back playing soccer, doing CrossFit, flipping tyres, doing 550-pound deadlifts. It's not just a generic, oh yeah, I feel better, or I went from not being able to run to being able to run with no pain, to playing soccer again. I went from not being able to lift something with my shoulder to being able to lift it again. I went from not being able to move my shoulder when I first met you. I mean, that's a very real result. Again, it's not, yeah, I think I feel better. It's, I can't do this, now I can. You know, it is what it is.
2 weeks ago when you were here and we pulled 200 cc's that day, in like, the whole thing was said and done in 20 minutes? Yep. So can you explain how it makes you feel and why you feel like it seems to enhance your performance?
It actually feels like having a full breathing session. You know, like when you oxygenate your system. Especially, I've had 5 nose operations, so despite the fact of how much I train, I'm not sure my oxygen intake is as much as it should be. And it just makes me feel more energetic. It just makes me feel like, as I say, I've taken in more oxygen and oxygenated my system, basically. I mean, I can feel it in my legs, in my arms. It's not dissimilar to going into a hyperbaric oxygen chamber.
Nice. How about recovery?
The recovery aspect has been mainly when I've come, a lot of the time I have inflammation, as you know, and I mean the recovery from that is the quickest out of anything that I end up doing.
Wow.
And I mean, oftentimes, as I say, I come from a pain perspective that's normally through inflammation, through one thing or another, and that tends to subside in a space of hours.
Wow, great. So explain a little bit about what your goal is, because your goal is not to heal from an illness, it's more to heal from training.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a compounded effect of 30 years of training very hard and abusing my body somewhat from that perspective. I mean, I've had 9 operations in the last 11 years that are the result of just training extreme. I've had 3 elbow operations. The one on this arm was as little as, 6 months ago. Mm-hmm. Shoulder op, 3 knee operations, 5 nose operations. And I've now had site ozone on my face, my neck, probably every part of my body. So I use it both in recovery from training whenever I do get any knots and pains, but equally as a preventative thing to keep me at optimum performance throughout as well.
Excellent. So you've had hyperbaric experience.
Yep.
And you kind of compared the two.
There's unless there's a new one that's come out, there's probably not a recovery or a health optimizing modality that I haven't tried, simply because I try and be at the forefront of looking after my own health. And as I say, with having had so many injuries, I'm always trying to see the things that work the most, and I'm very pragmatic in the sense that if something works, I'll continue to do it. If it doesn't, I won't. And the very first time I came to see you, I was diagnosed with stage 3 arthritis in my knee, which just doesn't exist anymore since.
You don't have pain,
no,
inflammation.
I mean, I play soccer again, I do CrossFit, I flip tyres, I do handstand push-ups, you name it. And this is part of, along with sort of doing cryotherapy and stuff, that I use it both as prevention and cure, more for prevention now than the cure. But I tend to push myself until sometimes there's a cure required.
I understand. Okay, so explain a little bit about a training day for you and then this therapy to help your recovery.
So my training, I do CrossFit 4:30 in the morning. I'm up at 4:30, I train about 5:15. By about May time, I build up to 2 a days. So I'm training anywhere from 10 to sometimes 15 times a week. To to the point where even though I combine body parts and I don't do the same things over and over again, that still is a lot of oxidative stress on my system. So that involves flipping tyres, 13-mile runs, CrossFit sessions, boxing, just literally every facet really of a rounded training routine. And I train with I have an elevation mask for restrictive breathing to basically replicate elevation training.
So you're deprived of that oxygen?
Yeah, intentionally to force my own breathing patterns and stuff to make me breathe more efficiently. But equally, along with that, not just the training side, the diet and everything else. I mean, I try my best to optimise. I mean, I just turned 40.
You just turned 40?
3 months ago.
Wow.
And I'm fitter than probably when I was 20.
Wow, that's amazing. And you feel good?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking to get back to 4.9% body fat in the next 3 months.
4.9% body fat at age 40.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah, so.
So, what's your goal? Is it like a 12-week goal?
So I had a bit of a sporadic back end of last year. So now my diet's all set out from an extremely clean diet perspective till the 2nd of April, along with my trainings all planned out. And it really is a simultaneous detoxification as well as just a rebuilding of and restructuring of my muscles and everything and a fat perspective. But all of that requires the oxygenation, it requires the simultaneous detoxification. It's just not one element of it.
So you combine all of that?
Yes, because otherwise what happens, and I know this from previous experience, as my training starts getting progressively harder and harder, if I don't combine stuff like doing the ozone, I start to notice more and more soreness, and that feeds on itself in terms of getting injury and so forth.
Oh, gotcha. So if you're not doing consistent therapy, I mean, this prevents injury?
Yeah, I've done it a lot of the time where I'd come to see you when I'd be injured. I'd see you up until the point I was well again, and then you'd see me 4 months later when I was injured again.
Yeah.
And irrelevant of the cost of doing that, it just seems more prudent to actually prevent it as opposed to letting it happen in the first place.
So that was a slower, I mean, if you just were coming in for therapy based on injury, it would take you all that time to heal and then to have to ramp back up to what your goal is for the day.
And equally as well, I know from one of the real brilliant aspects of this, I was explaining earlier, especially in Western medicine, if you've got an issue with your knee, they want to treat your knee. Well, that's generally coming from your hip. It could even be your shoulder that's causing your knee issues.
That's right.
But I know when you've site treated me for ozone, it could be on my elbow or my shoulder. I'll feel it somewhere else in my body because that needs it more, because it gets drawn to that area that maybe is more inflamed.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, I know that by doing like this major, for instance, it's impacting my entire body and going to the places that it's needed more so than maybe something else would do, you know?
So how does that feel to you?
It's the most encompassing thing I feel like I can do for myself. I mean, just looking at the difference in the colour of my blood when it went in to when it comes out again.
Amazing.
And as I say, I've had 5 nose operations through fighting and so forth, and with conscious effort, I can really get my oxygen intake there, but it's not there as my default setting, shall we say. So being able to oxygenate, making sure that I oxygenate my system, even if it's once a month or once every couple of weeks in this way, it's at least giving me a safeguard from that perspective.
Got it. How do you feel it has impacted your health in, say, preventing infection?
Well, I mentioned that I had flu last week, but that's the first time I've had anything like that for probably, I can't even recall. And that was a simultaneous just after the Christmas period, my diet hadn't been that great up to that point. I started dieting, so I literally gave myself every opportunity, and I played 2 games of soccer that day prior to. So I stacked the odds in my favour to be able to give myself some ability to get some kind of infection in that sense. But prior to that, I mean, I'm never sick, ever. And as I say, it's a combination of the diet, the training, but equally having this as part of my routine as well, I believe.
Can you speak to how the local ozone injections feel different than this comprehensive therapy?
I liken it probably to like getting a massage. It would be a very, just a relaxing massage where you're not really getting, it's just relaxing from that standpoint. Whereas, as I say, generally I have the local when it comes to, I mean, from a training, from inflammation or something like that. So I feel it very specifically, and equally, the amount I feel it is always in direct response to how inflamed the area is, I find as well. Because there's times when you'll maybe inject me in 30 different places and none of them will hurt except for one place, because that's where all the inflammation is. Mm-hmm. So from that perspective, it's the quickest, I find, way of that undoing itself. It might be sore for a couple of seconds, but it's in direct proportion to how quickly it works for me, so it's worth
it.
Yeah.
How uncomfortable it might be to the results.
Yeah, and again, I mean, that discomfort might last for 3 or 4 minutes, as opposed to me then being uncomfortable for the next 2 weeks because the inflammation's still there.
Gotcha.
And I've done it before where I've done it also where a muscle's been fixed, but the inflammation hasn't disappeared, so then I train and the muscle's never quite fixed because the inflammation hasn't disappeared, and I've iced, I've done other things that don't ever quite get rid of it fully.
And ozone really addresses it.
Yes. Especially I find in joints as well. Because there's times like when I had my elbow operation where I had a pocket of fluid, if you remember, that didn't ever go. Yes, and
we pulled it off.
yeah, I mean, and as I mentioned how many operations I've had, you can see on my elbows, and you've done the neural therapy on my scars and stuff, I mean, they're virtually non-existent.
They're beautiful. I think you would have a lot of adhesions and scar tissue.
And I mean, some of these were scars that I'd had for 10 years as well. Mm-hmm. So
I remember the first time you came in, I was working on a shoulder, and just, it was, you know, you were uncomfortable.
My labrum was reattached. I was told I would never be able to use my shoulder again. I mean, I do handstand push-ups and flip tires and whatever, and that was within 6 months.
Wow, okay. It's an impressive therapy.
So how do you feel now? You're nearly to the bottom of this.
Yeah, see, I can feel a surge in energy. I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but I'm in tune with how things make me feel, and if they're, especially like immediately. Mm-hmm. And it does feel like I've taken a lot of deep breaths. I don't know, you know when you meditate
mm-hmm.
and you go for a breathing thing and you feel oxygenated and you feel like
it's
lighter.
Euphoric.
Yes, yeah.
So kind of, I want to say this is euphoric, but...
Yeah, but it definitely is. I mean, as I say, I can feel it all over my body.
Awesome. Great circulation, oxygenation, and that tunes you into every part of your body.
Yeah.
Because you can feel everything from your toes up.
Yeah.
Okay. That's great.
And then one of the other things, and one of the other reasons I do it, it's like you get in the mindset of taking a tablet for something like vitamins or whatever else, but a lot of the time you're just guessing at what you're meant to be having. Mm-hmm. Whereas, as I said to you, like I've come to you before for my elbow, and then you inject me there and I feel it over here because I'm more inflamed over here, so it goes to that point. With doing the major specifically, it's going all around my body, so it might be somewhere I'm unaware of, you know?
Mm-hmm. And then you might not be feeling discomfort or pain from that, but you go train, and then that is what pops up, but you would never know that.
Yeah.
And got it.
And even if there's no pain involved, it's just a beneficial, prudent thing to do.
Yeah.
I was, I may have mentioned earlier, but I've had 3 knee operations on this knee, 2 on this knee. I've got no meniscus. I had my meniscus removed 3/4 at 15, and then later fully. So literally I'm bone on my right knee. Played soccer in a charity game back in England 4 years ago maybe. When I came back from that, it was a competitive game for 4 weeks afterwards, I couldn't walk properly. Obviously, I've been having tremendous pain. So then I looked into various therapies and I started getting hyaluronic acid injections, and even with insurance, they were costing me like $450 a go. And from memory, it was a 3 or 4 month process. And once that was done, I literally felt zero improvement. I was told I had stage 3 arthritis in my knee. I was about to be put into a knee brace, which would have stopped me from being able to use my leg, and they wanted me to do that for 6 weeks. And at that point, I was like, well, this can't be the way for me to actually get use of my knee back again. So, as is my way, I just refused to accept that that was the way. So I read. I looked on the internet. I read a book called The 4-Hour Body by Tim Ferriss, where he tried loads of different therapies, one of them being ozone. When he spoke about how he'd had arthritis from injuries and stuff like that, and how it basically was like a scavenger for those cells that cause arthritis in the system. And in it also mentioned a process called activation muscle integration technique. And I discovered somebody here in Round Rock as well. I mean, the only person in Texas and within 10 miles of my house, which was fortunate. So the combination, I had 33 muscles in my legs switched off. So the practitioner of the AMET was able to switch those back on, and he referred me to Melissa for the ozone, because I mentioned to him I wanted to get that done. So that 1-2 punch effectively, I mean, I was back running within probably about a week and a half, I think.
Wow.
And you were supposed to be on a brace for 6 weeks and then who knows what?
Yeah.
Wow.
Having 33 muscles in my leg and everything going through my groin didn't help me in that sense, but I mean, I used to get, and that's another byproduct. I've had 6 broken arms. 4 in one, I can't even remember, 4 in one, 2 in the other. But when it was cold, like it is now, or damp, my wrist would ache, and they would click as well. My wrist don't ache, my knee doesn't like. So any point where I'd had these injuries, I would get aching in, whether I don't get any of that anymore. I mean, I've still got my no meniscus, so I'm still bone on bone. So at times I get discomfort, but that's because I've got no cartilage there, not because there's any actual, anything there that's causing me any pain, you know.
So basically, it wasn't really an issue. You weren't afraid of using ozone.
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, I'd be more afraid to use pharmaceuticals or stuff that I don't. I mean, say things are side effects. They're not effects. They're not side effects. They're effects, aren't they? And also, I listened to various podcasts and so forth, and I read up a lot beforehand and realised what a massive antioxidant it was, how powerful it was, and the way I looked at it, I'd tried other processes that had yielded me 0 results. If it gets results, I'll do it.
So, let's talk about the cost, because, everything is out of pocket. People consider, oh, should I use it, should I not use it? So how did you justify it?
You're talking to somebody who doesn't, my kids have only eaten organic food since I've been born. Couldn't tell you what non-organic food costs because it's not food to me. People don't think anything about paying $6,000 to go on a vacation. I couldn't tell. I don't even know how much it costs. I just sign, and that might be blasé. It's not, because without the full use of my body, I can't do the things I want to do in my life. I can't play with my kids. I mean, I've got a 7 and a 4-year-old. I went to, there's a new Ninja Warrior place open up in Austin last weekend. I was the only adult in there, swinging on the monkey bars and doing everything. And I intend to be doing that for the foreseeable future, put it that way. So to me, it's not a cost. It's a necessity. So, as I say, people don't think about spending $500 on going out to a bar for, you know what I mean, for the weekend or whatever it is. And equally, I've said to you as well, I've had 9 operations, and with insurance, I've probably spent at least, I would say, $100,000 out of pocket just on operations, and those weren't from any disease. They were just because I'd had previous injuries. So when you say prevention is better than cure, I mean, I wouldn't know what it would cost to actually have anything actually wrong with me, as opposed to just something correcting a bone thing, you know. It's not something I'm prepared to find out either.
So how do you know for sure it was working for you?
Because I told you I couldn't run, and I was running 2 weeks later, and I was back playing soccer, doing CrossFit, flipping tyres, doing 550-pound deadlifts. It's not just a generic, oh yeah, I feel better, or I went from not being able to run to being able to run with no pain to playing soccer again. I went from not being able to lift something with my shoulder to being able to lift it again. I went from not being able to move my shoulder when I first met you. That's a very real result. Again, it's not, yeah, I think I feel better. It's, I can't do this, now I can. It is what it is.
It was a very limited range of motion when I
Yeah.
first met you, and it was very quick recovery.
Yep.
And he's not wimpy. It's not like he came in and he just wouldn't move it.
I'd been to physiotherapy, and equally I know that if I'm trying to use something and it's putting me in pain to do it, keep forcing through that is. I wish I'd have known this at a younger age, because that's probably what caused me a lot of my issues, but that was mainly through training too hard. My point being, if I'm given a protocol to do and it's hurting me to do it, that's probably not the thing for me to be doing, yet this enabled me to. It was scar tissue, it was a combination of everything, the inflammation and everything that was caused by that. And that, as I say, there's nothing I can't do that I could do before now.
What do you think about the comments that I've heard and read? Oh, there's not much science behind ozone.
I'm very much at the point whereby the mainstream, if you do what everyone else is doing, you get the same results. Most people that you hear about are taking pharmaceuticals week in, week out, they're overweight. I don't subscribe to the same philosophy as most of the general population, hence the reason why they're not of the same level of fitness, they don't operate in the same capacity. I don't need somebody to tell me that it's raining outside. If something works for me, it works. I don't need 10 years of scientific evidence. My aunt tells me 4 years after the event, when I've told her to have coconut oil 6 years ago, and she said, oh, I read it in the paper, so now it must be the correct thing to do. If something works, it works. I don't need an expert to tell me that that's the case. So from a scientific standpoint, I'm not actually sure that it's not scientifically validated. It's not scientifically validated when it comes to the mainstream, because that would put a lot of people's noses out of joint, I would imagine.
So how long have you been coming to get ozone?
Probably 4 years.
What's your protocol? What have you been doing?
So this major hemo where blood gets extracted, gets injected, gets put back in, and then generally when which just because of the amount of train I do get sort of niggling injuries and so forth, and it's just inevitable. And then when I get inflammation, I come and get neural therapy, like site-specific. I probably have this once a month, and then in terms of actually getting the neural therapy on certain parts, that's very on a needs-must basis. I might come 5 times in 2 weeks if need be. Generally, it's not as much as that, because after a couple of sessions, it tends to take care of it.
So who do you recommend this to?
Anyone who's interested in being healthy, really. Anyone who's got fatigue, anyone poor diet, not able to breathe properly, especially from a pain perspective. Anyone who's got joint pain, and I've got friends. One of my friends is about 50, and his shoulder is hurting, and he's like, "Yeah, well, I'm 50 now." It makes me speechless. Just to put up with having pain because of a perceived age, it makes no sense to me. It's a solution, as I say, especially to inflammation, which is the biggest cause of most people's disease and pain. So again, I do it because it works. If it didn't, I wouldn't do it.